Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Nanxi Liu. Nanxi is the CEO and co-founder of Enplug, a leading digital signage software company used by Fortune 500 companies, banks, hospitals, manufacturing facilities, elevators, and universities. The software enables businesses to distribute visual communication, such as dashboards, videos, presentations, safety messages, news, and other content on any digital screen. Nanxi was named Forbes 30 Under 30 and Fortune's 10 Most Promising Women Entrepreneurs. In her free time, Nanxi enjoys playing tennis, snowboarding, and flying planes. She is a concert pianist and has performed live on NBC and ABC. Nanxi graduated from UC Berkeley with a BS in Business Administration and BA in Political Economy. Nanxi lives in Los Angeles and is a Dodgers fan. Nanxi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We want to start by saying that is a very shortened version of her bio, and the full bio will be inside our show notes.
Yes, we couldn't fit all of Nanxi's incredible background in our 30-second clip, so we will definitely include everything in the text.
Definitely. Yeah, today's a very special episode. Nanxi is my hero. I'm so excited to have her on the show. I've been fangirling over her for a while now, and Nanxi, let's hop right into let's talk a little more about your childhood and how you became the person that you are today.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so where'd you grow up and what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so I was born in China. And so for the first couple of years of my life, I actually lived with different family members, grandparents, aunts and uncles. So for example, my aunt and uncle in China, when I was a kid, I actually called them mom and dad.
Wow.
Because my parents were actually in Europe. So basically I was born and then my parents went to Europe. They couldn't afford to take me along. So I just lived with different relatives, as is kind of, I think, a lot of folks that I know. And then finally, when my parents came to the US, they picked me up, or my mom picked me up in China and then brought me to the US. And at that point, by the time I came to the US, I was 5 years old. And I think I had not seen my dad literally in 3 to 4 years straight, which is pretty crazy as a kid, but not that I really remember that much of it. But then went and landed in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is this kind of retirement feeling kind of town in Colorado. So I grew up in Colorado before then moving to California for college.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And did your parents study for their PhD in Europe, right?
Yeah, so my parents actually had undergrad in China. My dad had a master's in China already. And then they went to Europe for my dad to get his second master's, my mom for her first one. And then when they came to the US, my dad was getting his PhD. And then my mom was then working on her second master's.
Yeah. And when your parents brought you over to the US, you were living in subsidized housing. Was that right?
Yeah, as many immigrant families do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a humble upbringing too. And, congratulations to your parents for raising such a successful daughter, And
they're great. Although they will say I was definitely a rebellious kid. Like middle school, high school, I had college boyfriends. So for all the Asian parents out there, if you have a problem child, it's okay. It'll be okay.
Yeah. And, we heard some other podcasts too that, you started playing the piano as a kid and it was basically self-taught, and that sort of taught you the discipline and the self-hustle that you kind of rolled over to your entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit more about that process and that journey?
Yeah. So my parents, when I was 6 years old, we had somebody that lived in the apartment above us. It was a girl who had a piano. And so I would hear her playing piano. And I think at some point I asked my parents I would love to play the piano. And my parents are they're working multiple jobs. My mom's coming home late working as a waitress at night, right? It's like, okay, how do we get piano? But they found a piano for $100 at a garage sale. It had some broken keys, but we got the piano. And that was a piano that I played on for many years, won lots of competitions practicing on that piano. But they got me this piano, and my first piano teacher made a huge impact in my life. Her name was Violet Hine. Mrs. Hine, and she spent many years teaching me piano, and she charged $8 an hour for piano lessons, which is incredible. And that was really the only thing my parents could really afford. And so I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, piano was the first thing where it's the connection as a kid. If you put work into doing something, you can see the results. And there's no better thing than learning an instrument or a sport. Certainly for me, it was an instrument, and my parents couldn't afford any kind of like after school activity, right? So I go home, I have no options. I just have a piano. So I play piano because there literally were no other things to do. And so I actually enjoyed playing piano. I still play piano. This is the grand piano that I remember my parents, when I was growing up, they were like, oh, if you win this like big piano competition, we'll finally get like a grand piano. Well, I won that piano competition, but then I went to college. And so I never got the grand piano I wanted. And so finally, of course, in my adult life, finally fulfilled my own dream of wanting a grand piano. But yes, growing up, I definitely learned discipline through piano, and that you just have to put in time to get things, regardless of what it is.
I love that. I love that it wasn't exactly forced on you. It was something that you picked up out of interest and passion. Because I think that a lot of us can say that we got piano forced onto us.
Yes, for a lot of Asian kids, they had their parents force piano into them.
Yeah, but we can't wait to hear you play one day. Probably look up. You guys already, for our listeners, look up Nanxi's YouTube videos. Hopefully she has some videos of her playing piano.
There's a couple of ones from like college way back when, but yes, it's my meditation nowadays when I play.
That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, flash forward a couple of years, and now you're at UC Berkeley. You went to Berkeley on scholarships. Congratulations on that. And I want to hear about the story about you finding your first company. About the bar situation. How did this all happen?
I would say like throughout my life, all the things that I was doing leading up to my senior year, meeting my Nanxi Bioscience co-founder at a bar, I diversified myself in a lot of different types of activities. Mm-hmm. And it was strictly because I love meeting new people, and I guess I have lots of different interests, and I wish I could be like some folks. They're just like really into one thing, and they dive really, really deeply into only one industry or topic. I could never do that. I wish I could, but I couldn't. Like, I loved music. I loved politics. I loved tech and the sciences. And so even high school, I was doing a lot of activities around that and a lot of leadership around that. And so then by the time I was in college, I was sort of used to, if I meet somebody brilliant, I'm like, okay, I have to go and work with them. And I learned just through lots of different organizations and interactions that smart people are in high demand, and their attention easily shifts based on who is able to grab their attention the best, right? And so for my senior year, while I'm at this bar, this is actually after a hacking session with a couple of high school friends that I was meeting up with in Colorado. I hadn't seen them in a little bit. And so we were just working on this other random app together. And then it was like midnight. It's like, all right, let's go take a break, go to this bar called Sundown Saloon in Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. So we go down, super dive bar. It's like the ones where you have the peanuts and you just like throw the peanut shell on the ground. And we're sitting there, and basically like there's this very tall guy over there at the other side of the bar. And I'm like, oh, who's that guy? And my friend was like, oh, he's a famous biochemist. And I'm like, okay, that's not every day that somebody will know this random biochemist at the bar. And he was like, yes, this is like the star PhD student. And I was like, I have to meet him. And I have no shame. And so I was like, tell him that I want to talk to him. Literally, my friend goes over there and is like, hey, that Asian chick over there wants to talk with you. And I'm sure he has other things in mind when he comes up to me to chat, and he speaks Chinese fluently. I mean, he literally was a genius. He's MIT. When he was in high school, my co-founder Balaji Sridhar developed one of the most efficient ways to remove arsenic from water while he was in high school.
Wow.
He's still getting royalty payments from water treatment plants for this technology he developed in high school. Absolutely brilliant person who, at a very young age, got an MD and PhD. And so at midnight at a bar, we were just talking about, for example, cell regeneration and protein scaffolding, and all the things that he was working on in his lab. And so I said, all right, I want to talk with you about building a company literally in the next 12 hours later. So we're chatting, we've set the foundation at this bar. And because I understand smart people, brilliant people always have their attention shifted. A lot of people are just, they talk, but they don't follow through. I literally set a time and sent him my address to meet him immediately I guess technically the same day, since it was after midnight, to go and build a company. So he came over, this is at my parents' house, and I was like, all right, let's build a company. You do the science part, I'll take care of all of the business part. And the reason he believed that I could actually execute on this is throughout college, I was building a lot of different apps, monetized a lot of random projects that I was doing, whether it was like a school project, I would take it all the way. I would build something for one of my engineering classes, but instead of just saying, okay, submit it for a grade, I would literally go and try to monetize it. And I did that successfully for a couple of them. And so that was sort of my data to demonstrate, hey, I will make things happen. And so then once I got back to Berkeley, we were just working remotely on Nanxi, which is we wanted to develop a polymer that eliminates refrigeration for vaccines. And so every single day while remotely, and we've got, at the time, I think we were using Skype. I know Skype's not cool anymore, but at the time we were using Skype. And every single day we would just have milestones. I said, you focus on the science, I will get all the funding for it. And that's what we did.
Wow. That's quite the hustler.
It's incredible.
We need to send you an Asian Hustle Network sweater now.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love how you just kind of pointed out that when you spot brilliant people, you have to meet them. I think for a lot of people, especially when they're not familiar, just like getting themselves out there, they feel intimidated. But I love how you have that hustle mentality, and love you kind of just jumped right into it and said, I have to meet this person.
I have to be honest with you though. When I saw your article 6 or 7 years ago, I made a goal one day that I wanted to talk to you face to face, because I also want to meet very talented and smart people. I never thought the day would come now, 6 years later, but here we are. I'm super excited for that.
That's awesome. Okay, so what's the next 6-year goal? Because you're going to achieve that for sure, Brian.
I don't know. We'll see. The next step is just talking to people like you, growing Asian Hustle Network, building a fostering, supported community. Because I think that, for the Asian community, it's so important for us to have people as leaders that look like us and sound like us, sort of break through. And obviously hearing your story 6 years ago really broke me through. I just remember flashback time. 6 years ago, I just moved to the Bay Area as a software engineer. And I was living with 6 other roommates, 5 other roommates in the small house. I'm like, man, I'm making 6 figures. I can't afford anything else. It sucks. So I was looking for starting companies, starting different ideas. I remember your article came up on Facebook or something, and I saw that immediately. I said, it's a 24-year-old successfully built 2 successful companies, right? And I showed my roommate that. I'm like, Nanxi, I want to meet her one day. I wanted to do business with her one day. I don't know what I'm going to do with her, but I want to meet her one day. And here we are in this podcast.
I love that.
Yeah. So you're definitely very inspirational, and, flash forward a couple more years, you started Enplug, with 5 other co-founders in LA this time. What was that process like? I know you guys pivoted a couple of times. There's a lot of hard lessons learned through the startup, but I want to hear more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So my senior year, I start Nanxi Bioscience. I get it funded. We get grants both from the government and universities, institutions, foundations, and as well as VC. And so we had it funded for 4 years. And at the time I was serving as CEO my senior year of Nanxi Bioscience. All the folks we have on the team all had PhDs or MDs except for me, the CEO, which is kind of, ironic. And so I quickly realized that my skill set was capped for what we needed at Nanxi Bioscience. So I handed the reins over to my amazing co-founder, Dr. Balaji Sridhar, to run the company. And at that time, right before graduation, actually, I have a funny graduation story too. I meet my co-founder for Enplug. And so I was actually already running Nanxi, but it had the funding it needed, which I helped get it there, but we had a lot of R&D that was needed, and that wasn't my expertise. And so I wanted to make sure I was using my time wisely for skill sets and knowledge and experience that I could apply towards the company. And so when I met my co-founder for Enplug, I was like, oh, this is much more of my background. I want to go and do Enplug. And so I meet him for 45 minutes in person. By the end of the 45 minutes, I knew I wanted to start Enplug with my co-founder, David. And so we started, and I moved to LA a week later to start Enplug. And this was really right after leaving Berkeley.
Well, I like how action oriented you are.
Super quick.
You moved hella fast.
You like 45 minutes, the next 12 hours, just like it's
1 week later.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the fact that there's no mental block.
Mm-hmm.
And has this something that you were almost born with, like just like not feeling the imposter syndrome, not feeling that fear, and just wanting to go for things out of curiosity? Like, did your parents foster that, or is it something you foster on your own?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I didn't feel like I had anything to lose. I think having grown up in China and still visiting my relatives in rural China where there's no running water, it's still pumping water out of wells. It's just like, I get a roof over my head. I have college education. If it doesn't work out, like there's a friend that's going to let me crash on their couch, right? So there's all these things where I didn't have a family that I had to take care of, or kids. And so because of that, it's like, why not? I really have nothing to lose. Yes, the alternative is doing investment banking at a fancy firm and getting paid that. But I didn't grow up with any money. And so having money, I was still pretty happy, a very happy person. And so because of that, it was like, actually, I just care about building something fantastic and great and impactful. And that made that I cared a lot more about that than money. So when you take and remove some of these fears, fear of failure, because again, if I failed, I didn't think it was that bad. I'll just go crash at a friend's place and go find a job. Didn't seem that bad. Not making any money. Well, I never had any money to begin with. And so that's okay. And removing those barriers made it a lot easier for me to dive into things that I really loved and people that I really wanted to work with.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that mentality. Yeah. And we'd love to know like the business strategy of Enplug as well as the marketing strategy, because we understand that when you had first started Enplug, you were actually going like door to door, kind of knocking on everyone's door, asking if they would be interested in something like this. And
starting from like the whole process of installation as well.
Yeah.
That's pretty insane.
And how has that shifted over time?
Yeah. So initially when I met my co-founder, David, the idea is that we would go and build a network of screens that were smart screens that would recognize who is in front of the screen and serve advertising and content. And so we started building that out and realized, wow, CapEx is really huge for this kind of company. We'd have to go and raise money to be able to install screens everywhere and support it with advertising dollars. And we realized we really don't enjoy selling ads. It's very competitive to sell ads against a Google or Facebook. And with out-of-home advertising, it's hard to measure and track conversion. So how do we convince advertisers to renew? But then we realized what we're really good at is software. So initially when we were trying to build this network of smart screens, we needed a software to be able to control remotely what all of these screens were showing, be able to show social media feeds, be able to show that restaurants Yelp scores and positive Yelp reviews, be able to have people take Instagram photos, hashtag that location's name or tag that location's name and show up on the screen, the TV screen, that location, right? And so we were trying to find a software to do that. We realized all the existing digital signage software was really expensive, very, very difficult to use, and just built decades ago, not modern technology at all. And so initially we were building a solution and we were the first customers of our solution. So we weren't trying to build digital signage software as the end product. We were just building it for ourselves to use. And then slowly our customers realized the software that we built to remotely control screens was way better than, trying to sell advertising. They were like, we just want to use your software. We don't need you to install a screen. We have screens in our businesses. Just give us your software. What do you want for the software? And we're like, oh, wow, we didn't really think about like charging for the software, and we love building product. And so that was a lot more fun to sell software and a product than to sell advertising. And so we really shifted to then selling software. Initially, we were selling the software to restaurants and bars where they would show digital menus using our software, or they would show, like a fun jukebox game, or Instagram, the social media feeds. And then we shifted to being able to show content in elevators, showing dashboards and metrics inside of corporate offices, showing financial data and information inside of banks or universities. And so that's actually where most of our market is today, which is our screens power the screens you see in elevators, inside of banks, universities, hospitals, manufacturing facilities. And that pivot was because this is what we're really good at building, but also what we enjoyed building. And this is where these customers are willing to pay a lot more for what we're building than some of the initial V1, V2 of our products.
I love that. I love how the customers sort of help you pinpoint your value proposition that you're proposing and actually made it more scalable. So I
told the story of what happened over the course of like 5 years and narrowed it down to like a couple of sentences, right? It's a very long, multi-year project to make this happen.
Yeah, we understand, talking to a lot of people on the show, that the entrepreneur journey is often very difficult and very lonely. Luckily that you have found very strong co-founders along that process. Can you quickly talk about any kind of mistakes that you made along the way in terms of hiring, or just, I want to hear the story about how you even became CEO of Enplug, because that's pretty unique in its own.
Yes. So I had, there was a team of 5 co-founders, and really I almost actually think about it as like 8 or 9, because we from day one had some amazing engineers be part of our team that are still part of our team today. And in fact, one of the 2 of them, one is our CTO Justina, and the other is our chief software architect Bruno. And so when we first started, there was no titles. It was all of the co-founders were going to do some kind of specific task. And there's so much to do with digital signage that we really did need that many people with different skill sets to manage different aspects of the business. And for me, naturally, it became finance, strategy, fundraising, sales. So all the business side piece. And so I was doing that. And then eventually I think it was somehow just very naturally just said, all right, Nancy, you'll be CEO. And I was like, okay, all right, I guess CEO now. Sure, let's do that. But there was a very humbling experience less than a year into building the company, where my co-founders one day just sits me down and is like, Nancy, we don't think you should be CEO. Whoa. And I was like, this came kind of out of the blue. And I was like, you know what, if you don't want me to be CEO, no worry. It's all good. I didn't really know the reasons why. And we're very, like, we're 22 years old at this point. Like for all of us, this was like our first job. We didn't really understand management and all of that. And it was basically a very small thing where we hired somebody to run sales, and my co-founders thought that the salesperson preferred somebody else as the CEO, my co-founder. And so then they were like, oh, we think David should be the CEO. And I was like, sure, David's awesome. He's my co-founder. He's the one that, first told me about the idea. Happy to give the reins to him. So handed the reins over to him for a little bit. And then a month later, they're like, wait, Nancy, we need you to be CEO again. We made a big mistake. Can you be CEO? Are you willing to do that? And I was like, all right, sure. For me, and I think I'm so glad to have that experience, because one, I think it's always good to be reminded of, we're privileged to be in any kind of position we are, and never to tie our ego into any kind of position. For me, it was always about, I just want to build the best company. I don't care about what my title is. If folks think I am better suited for another role, I'm happy to do that. But if they think I should be CEO, then great. And it was nice to go through that formal exercise of evaluating who do we want as CEO. But it happened in a very, like, probably not the most professional way of approaching how we select a CEO amongst co-founders. But that's how it happened. And we learned a lot from that experience, which is maybe don't choose a CEO based on who your employee, somebody you randomly hired, wants.
Oh man.
Oh, wow.
Wow, what a story. I just wanted to say I love just your mindset. And I think we often get so tied up with like titles and names and stuff. And we often forget what that North Star is, why we're in it in the first place. Like, what is our purpose in building this company, right? But I love how you were just pretty much like, whatever is best for the company, I'm willing to go with it.
Yeah. And, we heard from your other podcast too about your challenges of being a female founder. How you notice that you have to try much harder at fundraising or getting your respect or something like that. I want to hear more about that, because we are all about uplifting and empowering women in our Asian Hustle Network community. And just by hearing your piece of the story, and we want to inspire other female founders to take action and create their own legacy in companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I'm really grateful for are my best friends are all amazing female founders. They are the crew that I spend a lot of time with. They are incredible. They're inspiring. They run all sorts of different companies across industries. And I'm just so grateful to have them because we have that shared experience and we have each other's back. We know what we go through on a daily basis. Certainly when I started fundraising, it was really hard. Every person that I was pitching, I just looked so different than who they were and the other founders, tech founders especially, that they were used to seeing. And I want to give a lot of credit also to my co-founder, our CTO, Justina, for at the time, I think she was like one of like 2 or 3 female CTOs in the Los Angeles area of a tech company. And so she is incredibly accomplished in how she is able to manage the engineering team and just recruit top talent. I want to also give her a big shout out, but certainly throughout the journey, every single day. And I think for women who want to be in leadership roles, we all feel it from like as young as we can remember, the extra hurdles we have to overcome. And I credit my mom for being able to, kind of be giving me a really realistic picture of the world, which is you have to work harder, sadly. But make sure along the way that you make it easier for any other woman that comes and wants to go in the path that you have already moved down. And so as a young girl, I am very grateful. My mom would share lots of stories with me about successful women, everyone ranging from Amelia Earhart to Condoleezza Rice. My mom is a big fan of Condoleezza Rice, who was like, look at her, she plays the piano and then became Secretary of State. You too, you play the piano. Maybe you could be Secretary of State. That was the bridge she built. But I'm so grateful because stories, I think, impact people a lot. And so when I was growing up, my mom filled my world with successful women. So I never actually felt like there was no successful woman out there. And I think she did it intentionally. And it made a really big impact because I could see, look at all these different women accomplished in all sorts of different industries. I have a sister who's 18 years old. She's a freshman at UC Berkeley. And similarly, I try to fill her world and remind her of all the successful women that have been in history and are still alive today so that she knows that it's absolutely possible.
I love that. It's a great older sister mentality. And just
I'm a tiger sister for sure with her. Very much a tiger sister.
Definitely. I do want to shift the focus a bit too and, talk a little bit more about the stuff that you're working on right now. And I think I saw an article recently, I'm not too sure, about one of the companies under your portfolio that went IPO recently. Is that right?
So yes, I'm involved in a couple of different SPACs. I know this is something that I think has become very popular and hot recently. So I'm a seed investor, at-risk investor of a $450 million SPAC that IPO'd a couple of weeks ago, and just very, very excited about the whole team. Joseph, who's also a UC Berkeley alum, is the CEO and a friend that I've known for a couple of years. Actually, I met him when I was hosting an alumni event at my house for UC Berkeley, and he was one of the attendees. And so I always joke, you never know where you're going to meet your future co-founders or business partners.
Wow, that's amazing. And let's dive deep into that a little bit more, because we're looking at you, right? You're a CEO of Enplug. You're doing all these different things, and you currently manage a fund that's $2.5 billion. Is that correct?
Oh no, this is I get to be one of the seed investors. I'm not doing the hard work. The hard work is done by management. I'm on the board of a couple of publicly traded companies. Wow. And again, as a board member, I say it's management that does the hard work. As a board member, I'm there to support, ask the questions, and be a resource for management, of course, representing, I have to say like the cheesy thing, representing shareholder interests, which is what we do, but it's such like legal jargon. At the end of the day, it's being a board member that's making sure that we've got the right team in place to build a really successful company.
Yeah. Let's quickly talk about being a board member, because I know this topic is relatively foreign to the Asian community in some ways. It's like, wait, how do you become a board member and whatnot? Can you quickly talk about what is a board member and how do you become a board member essentially? Because when we talk about entrepreneurship, we're like CEOs, founders, CTOs, but there's never the conversation about, okay, what's a board? Why do we need a board? And how do you even get on a board,
Yes, absolutely. So I actually never really thought about boards and the power of a board, because again, my parents were teachers and then engineers. I didn't grow up around a business community at all. And so I learned all of this sort of on the job. And a person I want to credit to giving me this idea of I should be on boards is my ex-boyfriend's mom, who I'm still really good friends with. In fact, I'm still good friends with all my ex-boyfriends and their family. They're all amazing people. But my college ex-boyfriend's mom, she's an amazing businesswoman. And when I was like 25 years old, she was like, you should be on public company boards. And I'm like, Mrs. Reed, thank you so much for believing in me. But I think generally people who sit on public company boards, they're 50, 60 years old. It's just, they're much older and they've been CEOs of these massive companies in the past. And that's traditionally what it's been. There's legislation now that is shifting the demographics and encouraging boards and management to be open to now more diverse members. But that was sort of my introduction to boards, and to be like, oh, well, what's so interesting about boards? There's a couple of things, which is that you are the ones that are managing management. So there's the CEOs and the CFOs, the COOs, right? But who's managing and watching the CEO, evaluating the CEO? It's the board. And the board is, of course, representing the rest of all the shareholders. For a public company, you have boards for nonprofits, you have government boards, you have public company boards. And so I served on all of these. It started out, the first boards I served on, of course, were my own company boards. Mm-hmm. And then the next one that I got was nonprofit boards, which was Lady Gaga Foundation's Youth Advisory Board. And that was such a great eye-opening experience for me about what it means to be a board member, a nonprofit. And then I was 24 years old when Covington Capital, which manages about $3 billion, they reached out to me and they said, we would love for you to be on the board of advisors for us. And then I was looking at the other board of advisors, and it's all people who have built massive companies. Like one of the other board members, he was the president at Disney TV, and just super impressive. I was like, wait, I'm 24. Are you sure? And I was like, what's the catch? And they're like, there's no catch. We will pay you a lot of money for attending each of the meetings. And so for public company boards, to give you a sense, oftentimes the compensation for, it is powerful. And I think I mentioned compensation because I think it's one where it demonstrates boards are really significant positions with a lot of influence in a company, both on defining the strategy of the company, which means, how do you speak to your customers? But also, who are you hiring in the company, and what does diversity look like and culture look like in your company? The boards all get involved with that. But boards, you get paid a couple $100,000 to be on boards of companies, for public companies generally. And so one of the legislation that has come out, of course, that we've heard a lot of conversation in our community is basically the requirement now not only to have a minimum number of women on boards, but also folks who are diverse or from minority communities, right? And so I think that is going to be really, really impactful for improving the lack of diversity currently on public company boards.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, I would love to know, you're serving on boards of different companies while running your own company. How do you manage your time? And how do you make sure you're allocating time to, your prioritized tasks every day?
And your mental health.
Yeah.
It's actually so important, I think, for folks to realize, and I tell my sister this too, I have lots of free time. I'm going to Colorado on Thursday, and I'm going to be celebrating my stepmom's 50th birthday. I'm going to be taking the weekend to just hang out with family. And I take a lot of me time, just time where I play video games, I go spend time with friends. I go out to eat. I make sure I sleep and exercise. Those are really, really important. I think I actually believe when people find time for themselves and make sure to craft times and not feel guilty about it, they'll actually be more productive and get things done. And so even though I'm involved with all of these different organizations, I really do have lots of time. And for example, like my boyfriend, Jonathan, when we first started dating, he was not convinced that I had lots of free time. He was like, "You're never going to see me." And I was like, "No, actually, I bet I will always have time to see you. And it'll be you that ends up." He's like, "No, there's no way." Anyways, it ends up being that, which is that I really do actually prioritize above anything health and spending fulfilling time with friends and family above everything else. If we take care of ourselves and our health, then we can really take care of business.
I love that. And next, out of curiosity now, like, how you built enough systems and processes in place to like be able to delegate that and create time for yourself?
Yes. And I think even in the early days, things never feel like work, and that always helps. So when do things not feel like work? Things don't feel like work when you're doing something you're good at that you enjoy. And so as much as possible, I try to make sure the things I work on have a lot of impact. And it seems like I'm getting lots of things done because if I'm really good at this one thing and I can knock it out in like an hour, but somebody else might take like 5 hours to do it, then I can do that kind of task for many different organizations and be able to get things done that others might take way longer to get done, right? So my output at the end of the day is the same, but I don't need as much time. And so things with strategy, fundraising, product, finance, those are things that I'm good at. Building teams I enjoy doing and can evaluate. And so things that I'm not good on that would take me way longer, and I don't think I could be involved in multiple organizations if I was doing that. For example, in the early days, of course, everyone on the team was coding and building the initial lines of code. But now, if I'm not good at that, if I were told to go and build this new app for Enplug, I would never see any of my friends because that's not my core competency. But you tell me, hey, we want to build this next product feature and we need the outline of all the scenarios and the user experience. That's when I can come in and I say, okay, this is how I think it should look. And I will sketch it out and design it. I can quickly draw it out, and I love doing it and get it done a lot faster, and then hand it over to the engineers to go and build. And so that's how I think I've been able to do a lot of different things for different organizations. It ends up being the same thing: strategy, business, finance, fundraising, building team.
That's amazing. I think your sense of awareness like really shines through. You know, you're fully aware of who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, as you're going through your journey, that's something that you first face is like your limitations, literally like, oh, what am I good at? What am I bad at? And when you're facing that, what was going through your mind as you're like evaluating yourself and sorting things out? Did you write in journals? Did you write in whiteboards? Did you sit there and think, or did you have an executive coach tell you? Like, how'd you figure all this part out? Because that's not easy, by the way. You make it sound so simple, but in actuality, you have to go through some hardships to really see how you function as a person.
Yeah, I would credit, there's a lot of organization I was a part of in high school. I guess just growing up, being very open to feedback and taking feedback and not taking it personally. And the willingness to give feedback encourages other people to give feedback. And then when you hear this feedback, then I think that's where you constantly improve. So in my early days, it was piano. Piano, you get immediate feedback, right? You play a wrong note, your teacher says, you played a wrong note, and you need to do this better, that better, right? Like it's totally okay. So I think as much as possible, if people put themselves in a place where they receive feedback, that helps a lot. Then in college, it was being part of lots of different organizations. It was being part of student government, where there are different political parties at Berkeley. There's the Liberal Party and the very Liberal Party. I was part of the Liberal Party. I was elected to be vice president for our student body. And so I felt like I was never doing anything right, because I would receive feedback from the other party about everything I was doing wrong. But it's a humbling experience, and you learn, you can start seeing other people's perspective, and then you start being more critical and evaluating your own work. But at the same time, I had my other party saying, hey, this is what you're doing correctly. So in a startup environment, the best people to give feedback are really your team. And so do you make it easy for your teammates, your employees, your co-founders to give you feedback? And are you a person that is open to that? So clearly, when we started Enplug, feedback was very, very open communication, right? Enough that my co-founder was like, we just don't think you should be CEO, right? Like super honest, like immediately when they wanted it to happen, they shared it. But then when they changed their mind, they immediately said, hey, we want you to. And so I was always receiving feedback from my co-founder, and I had the benefit of having 4 other co-founders. All of us started the company together. We actually weren't friends. We didn't really know each other before starting the company. And so because of that, it was easier to take emotion out of it. It wasn't like, somebody that you grew up with who was saying, hey, like, I just really don't like these lines of code you wrote. I think you organized it in not a great way, and you take it personally because it's a person you know for a long time, right? For us, it was always business. Like, we're sharing this because we want what's best for the company. It never felt personal. And so I think that's a really good places to get feedback. And that's where growth for me happens a lot, of where I need to work. Before I was told in my early days, my co-founder said, you are a workaholic in a very unhealthy way that makes everybody else feel like they can't take any time off. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, so now, I mean, like with Enplug, it's very shifted away from that. It used to be that I would always want to do these engineering sprints where it's literally like 3 days of like nonstop. You don't stop coding until you finish this thing. And my co-founder was like, this isn't college where you have these hackathons and you can do that. These are like professional people. And like, you can't just like have them be away from their family, right? And so I got immediate feedback, and I adjusted to this feedback. And I was like, all right, yes, my co-founders are right. But it's still a process. My CTO, Justina, she gives me feedback all the time, still every day. And I really appreciate it. It'll be like, Nanxi, I have this taken care of. You don't need to get involved in this. Or it's like, Nanxi, I need you to be like involved in this aspect. Can I get help? Right. And so I'm grateful for that. And I try to stay really open with feedback. And I tell my little sister this too. She's in a business fraternity, the same that I was part of at Berkeley, where, there's some hazing involved, and I'm super pro hazing, because I'm like, you're receiving feedback. People are yelling at you, but they're yelling at you because they're telling you what you're doing wrong. And it's better for people to tell you what you're doing wrong earlier than finding out like way later in life.
That's one way to look at it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, on the topic of team and team building, can you talk about the culture that you've built within your team and your co-founders? Because we've heard a couple of podcasts before, and you mentioned that you guys have really built like a really strong culture within your team, just eating lunch every day together, eating dinner. Yeah, trips. All of these retreats and everything. We'd love to know like how you built your culture.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We've made it very much a family-oriented culture, which means now, so anytime we do any kind of team activity, the whole entire family for that teammate is involved. They can bring their spouse, their partner, their kids. We pre-COVID, we did a team vacation to Mexico where we said, we'll pay for you to bring a +1, whoever that may be. And it was a pure vacation. Literally, like we had a new employee who was joining at the time. He was like, I bet we're going to have like team meetings. Nope. He was like, oh, wow. Like literally it was just full on vacation. We just hung out with the team. And so for me, it's very much our culture is, hey, if you're spending half of your waking life building something with people, you should enjoy working with those people. You should find it fulfilling and have fun and feel like you're growing. And so we really try to build that into our culture. I think a lot of the things come from myself and our CTO as a leader of the company, which is that we both really care about continuous growth. And so we're always pushing ourselves and our teammates to go explore things outside of work too. So we support our teammates. If they do competitive beach volleyball, we'll go support them there. One of our teammates, Jesus, he is a nationally ranked Yu-Gi-Oh player. And we even had him teach the entire team how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So we really try to be supportive all around, recognizing that work isn't just one thing that shows up in your life during certain periods of time, but it really does kind of spread out throughout your life. And we want to make sure that it's always positive as much as possible.
Yeah, and tell Jesus that I want to meet him because I used to play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid, and I used to win tournaments as well. So I'm not sure if I was ranked or not, but it did help with my sense of strategies in some way. It was like, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to win? You know? And yeah, I definitely want to meet him. And I think it's great that you're building such a family culture, because I think that's the one thing that people always underestimate is, as leaders, like your vision and your personality is shined throughout the entire company. You know, like how you feel about something, it's like, oh, show in the company. You know, if you're insecure about something, it'll show in the company. If you're confident about something, it'll show in the company, you know? And I think it was amazing that it's just a reflection of who you are as a person. You know?
Completely. I think everything down to even the vocabulary people use, certainly the team activities, whether people feel comfortable giving feedback or not, all comes down to, you know, the leaders. How do the leaders interact with one another and with their teammates?
Yeah, definitely agree. And, you know, as we're winding down the podcast, I'm kind of curious, like, what are your goals next year or 2 years or 3 years? Because it always seems like you're finding time to add more impactful things into your awesome resume already. Like, what do you see yourself in the next couple of years? And I have one more question after this about NFTs, but that's later, right? Ask this question first.
I definitely have a couple of different goals. So I'm involved, of course, with different companies, ranging from our public companies to my own company, invested in a TV show that I hope comes out this year. It's almost all Asian cast.
Wow. I'm
super excited about it. The first season is already out. It's called Drama World, and it's with a bunch of actually amazing tech founders. Alongside myself, are producers on the TV show, including Kevin Lin, who's a co-founder of Twitch, and Steve Chen, who's a co-founder of YouTube. They brought me in to be one of the producers. We're super excited about this show. And then, of course, there's some of the SPACs. I'm really excited for the SPACs and the companies that we will buy with the SPACs. And then outside of that, I actually have a couple of really fun travel plans with friends. So with people getting vaccines and different countries opening up, there's a couple of checklist items. So climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, going to Patagonia, going and doing a national parks road trip around the US are a couple of things I'm looking forward to.
Can't wait for that.
Awesome.
And we're looking forward to your show too. Just let us know. We'll help you bring up the news. But yeah, I think second to last question is, I want to hear about your thoughts on NFTs.
Oh, I mean, so actually for Enplug, we have a bunch of different ideas, because with NFTs, you can now show like digital art, right? You can have a specific digital art tied, and knowing that this is like your special, unique piece of art, limited edition, and having it appear on screens. And so, of course, we have an art app at Enplug. And so my NFT exposure right now is all around art and digital, of course, all of it, like digital goods, but specifically art, I think it's the future. I mean, it makes so much sense. You know, you had back in the day the baseball cards, and I suppose you could sort of forge these baseball cards, but it might be harder to, you know, forge these digital goods.
Yeah, and for our listeners, NFTs are non-fungible tokens.
Tokens, that's right. Yeah. And I think it's huge. I'm excited about it. Everything kind of blockchain related. I actually have this giant Bitcoin piece of artwork in my pool room. If you guys want to see it, I will.
We're doing it right after this podcast. Yeah, the reason why I brought up NFTs is because I'm like, wait, Enplug NFTs. It sounds like you guys are a match made in heaven, you know? So I just want to hear your thoughts on that. But I think
absolutely, you nailed it, and we are working on it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing more about that when he's ready.
Yeah, likewise. And so we have one last question for you, Nanxi, and that is one advice could you give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I'd say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So be thoughtful of who you spend time with.
That is a really good advice.
Yes.
And that being said, I'm sorry, man. I'm just kidding.
I walk you out of my life.
Just kidding.
My co-founders, my team, my friends, incredible people like you, Maggie and Brian. Like I'm just grateful that I feel like on a daily basis, I'm inspired. I am motivated, and so grateful to be able to interact and learn from the people I get to meet.
Yeah, definitely.
We're grateful to have you on the show. And how can our listeners find out more about you online, Nanxi?
Well, you can find me on Instagram. It's at Nanxi Liu. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I use Twitter a little bit, which is all Nanxi Liu, NANXILIU.
Awesome. Well, it was amazing hearing your story today. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Nanxi.
Yeah, thank you, Nanxi.
So much for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. I mean, thanks for inspiring me all these years ago and opportunity to meet right now.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the show.
We would like to get to the top 10 on iTunes, so be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We release an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys so much.